John Harper was born into a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town where cold winter winds slipped through the cracks in the thin walls. His family didn't have much, but for John, every day began with the warm smile of his mother, who worked tirelessly to keep their little household afloat. She was the family's sole provider, earning a meager living as a housekeeper for wealthy families in the town. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, put on her plain work uniform, and rode an old, rusty bicycle to her job. John would often wake to the faint clinking of her bicycle and the sight of her bustling around the kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast before heading out. "Make sure you eat and study hard," she'd remind him, her voice soft but firm, her eyes heavy with exhaustion from sleepless nights. To John, his mother was a pillar of strength, though he could see the toll life had taken on her. Things took a turn for the worse as tensions between his parents began to escalate. His father, a man prone to long absences, would return home only to bring arguments and the smell of alcohol with him. The once quiet home became a place of strained silence and whispered worries. When John was just 9, his parents divorced. The split turned his world upside down. His mother, unable to provide for him alone, sent him to live with his father in another town. It was a devastating blow. John not only lost the warmth of his mother's presence, but also felt the weight of abandonment. The distance wasn't just physical. It severed their bond, leaving John with only fading memories of her voice and the way she made everything feel safe. It was supposed to be a routine trip for John Harper, a rare break from his busy schedule as he drove through a small rural town on his way to a meeting. But as dark clouds rolled in and torrential rain began to fall, his journey took an unexpected turn. The rain quickly turned into a relentless flood, submerging roads and washing away anything in its path. John, sheltered in his luxury SUV, debated whether to continue or find refuge when he spotted something that made him slam on the brakes. Through the rain-smeared windshield, he saw a woman clinging desperately to a child, trapped on the roof of a partially submerged house. The floodwaters were rising fast, threatening to sweep them away at any moment. Without hesitation, John jumped out of his car, ignoring the cold water soaking through his expensive suit. He grabbed a rope from his trunk and waded into the rushing current. With grit and determination, John managed to pull both the woman and the child to safety. The boy, no older than 9, clung to his mother and stared up at John with wide, tear-filled eyes. John offered them a few comforting words, ensured they were safe with local rescue workers, and left without revealing who he was. For him, it was an act of instinct, a moment he didn't dwell on. Little did he know, this selfless act would change his life forever. John Harper's childhood struggles became the fuel for his relentless drive to succeed. Growing up in a chaotic household and later being separated from his mother left him with a profound sense of loss, but also a burning determination to build a better future. From a young age, John vowed that he would rise above his circumstances and never let poverty define his life. Through high school and college, John was laser-focused on his goals. He worked multiple part-time jobs, balancing them with his studies. While his classmates spent their weekends partying or relaxing, John was delivering newspapers at dawn, waiting tables in the afternoon, and studying late into the night. He carried the weight of his past on his shoulders, letting it motivate him rather than hold him back. After college, John entered the business world with the same grit and determination that had seen him through his tough beginnings. He started at the bottom, taking a sales job at a struggling tech company. His talent for problem-solving and his knack for building relationships quickly set him apart. Within a few years, he climbed the corporate ladder, eventually starting his own company. It wasn't long before his innovative ideas and unyielding work ethic made him one of the most successful entrepreneurs in his industry. Despite his wealth and achievements, John often felt an emptiness he couldn't quite fill. He lived in a beautiful home, drove expensive cars, and was celebrated in business circles, but something was missing. In quiet moments, his mind would drift to memories of his mother, her smile, her voice, and the sacrifices she made for him. No amount of success could replace the deep longing he felt for the emotional connection he had lost so many years ago. As John Harper's car pulled up to the modest school building, the energy in the air was palpable. Teachers and students had gathered in the courtyard, their faces lighting up with excitement as the sleek black vehicle came to a stop. For many of the children, it was the first time they had seen such a luxurious car, let alone met someone as successful as the man stepping out of it. John adjusted his suit and gave a polite smile as he exited the car, instantly greeted by a round of enthusiastic applause. The principal, a kind woman with graying hair, approached him with a warm handshake and words of gratitude. "Mr. Harper, it's an honor to have you here. The students have been eagerly awaiting your visit," she said. The courtyard buzzed with excitement as the students whispered among themselves. Many of them had only heard about millionaires in stories or on TV, and now one stood right before them. Some of the younger children giggled nervously, hiding behind their friends, while the older ones eagerly snapped photos with their phones. The ceremony began with a welcome speech, but John could hardly focus on the words. His attention was drawn to the faces in the crowd, bright, hopeful, and full of curiosity. The children looked at him as though he were a hero, someone who had achieved the impossible. The weight of their admiration settled on him, but so did a sense of responsibility. He was here not just to inspire them, but to show them that their dreams, no matter how far-fetched they seemed, were within reach. As the principal introduced him to speak, John took a deep breath and stepped forward, his mind already racing with thoughts of how he could make this moment meaningful for them all. The room fell silent as John Harper finished his speech, the sound of his words still hanging in the air. He glanced around at the sea of young faces, feeling a sense of pride and connection. Just as the applause began to ripple through the audience, a small voice suddenly broke through the noise, clear and unmistakable. "I remember you. You saved my life." John froze, his eyes darting toward the source of the voice. A boy, no older than 10, stood at the back of the room, his hand raised as if he couldn't contain himself. His bright red shirt made him stand out against the muted tones of the other students' uniforms. His face was flushed with emotion, and tears glistened in his wide, hopeful eyes. The murmurs in the room grew louder as the teachers and students exchanged confused glances. "What's he talking about?" one of the teachers whispered. John's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the boy, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle. The boy's face was vaguely familiar, but he couldn't immediately place him. Then it hit him, a memory he thought he had long buried. The storm, the flood, the desperate mother and child. Could it be? "Are you sure, son?" John asked, his voice faltering, caught between disbelief and a wave of emotions he wasn't prepared for. "Yes," the boy exclaimed, stepping forward. "You pulled me and my mom out of the flood. I'll never forget your face." The room erupted into whispers and gasps. Teachers looked at each other, unsure how to react, while the students craned their necks to get a better look at both John and the boy. John felt his breath catch in his throat. Of all the places, of all the people, the child he had saved was here, standing before him. He was stunned, his carefully composed demeanor slipping as he struggled to process the moment. For the first time in years, John felt the world tilt, leaving him both speechless and overwhelmed. Leo stepped forward, his voice trembling but determined. "It happened last year during the big flood," he began, his eyes darting between John and the stunned audience. "My mom and I were trapped in our house. The water came so fast, we didn't even have time to grab anything. It just kept rising and rising." The boy's words painted a vivid picture of that terrifying day. "We climbed onto the roof, but the water wouldn't stop. It was everywhere. I was so scared. My mom was holding me tight, telling me everything would be okay, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe it." Leo's voice cracked, and he paused to wipe his eyes. "We shouted for help, but no one came. People were too busy saving themselves. I thought that was it. We were going to drown." The room was silent, captivated by the boy's story. And then, out of nowhere, this man showed up, Leo continued, his voice rising with emotion. He turned to John. "It was you? You were driving by, and you stopped. You didn't even think twice. You grabbed a rope from your car and came into the water." John's expression softened, his memory of the moment becoming clearer as Leo spoke. The current was so strong, Leo said, gesturing with his hands as if reliving the struggle. You tied the rope around yourself and told us to hold on. My mom was shaking so much she could barely move, but you held her hand, helped her climb down. And when it was my turn, I was so scared I couldn't let go of the roof. But you looked at me and said, Leo's voice softened, and he looked up at John with an intensity that made the air in the room heavy. You're stronger than you think, kid. Just trust me. And I did. I let go because I trusted you. You pulled us both to safety. You didn't even stay long after that. You just made sure we were okay and then disappeared. The boy's words hung in the air, and tears welled up in the eyes of many in the room. I never got to thank you, Leo finished, his voice breaking. You saved my life, you saved my mom's life, and I'll never forget it. John felt a lump in his throat. He remembered now the way the boy's small hands clung to him, the desperation in his mother's voice. It had been an act of instinct, a moment he hadn't dwelled on. But hearing Leo's story brought back the gravity of that day. I'm proud of you for being brave, John said, his voice shaking slightly. I'm glad you trusted me, Leo, and I'm even more glad to see how strong you've become. The room burst into applause, the tension breaking as Leo's classmates cheered him on. For John, the moment was overwhelming, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and a sense that his life had come full circle. Leo took a deep breath before continuing, his gaze shifting to the floor as he described what life had been like after the flood. Things didn't get much easier after that day, he said quietly. The flood destroyed everything we had. Our house, our belongings, it was all gone. My mom and I had nowhere to go, and for a while, we stayed in a temporary shelter with other families who had lost their homes. He glanced up at John and the audience, his voice steady, but tinged with sadness. My mom, she's the strongest person I know. Even when everything felt hopeless, she never gave up. She worked day and night, doing whatever she could to make sure I could stay in school, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, even taking on odd jobs for neighbors. She did it all, just to give me a chance at a better future. Leo's words painted a vivid picture of the sacrifices his mother had made. Sometimes she wouldn't eat just so I could have enough for lunch at school. I'd wake up at night and see her sitting at the table, mending someone's clothes under a dim light, her hands sore and her eyes so tired. But she'd always smile at me and say, "We'll get through this." He paused, his hands gripping the edges of the podium. And we did somehow. But only because you saved us that day, Mr. Harper. If you hadn't been there. His voice trailed off, and he shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, his expression shifting to one of determination. You gave us a second chance. You gave me a chance to stay with my mom, to keep going. And because of that, I'm here today. I'm studying hard, just like she wants me to, because I want to make her proud. I want to make you proud, too. Leo's classmates and teachers looked on in awe, their admiration for the boy growing with every word. He turned back to John, his voice filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you enough. You didn't just save us from the flood. You saved us from losing everything, from losing hope. My mom always says we owe everything to you, and she's right. I'll never forget what you did for us. The room was silent, except for a few sniffles from teachers and students moved by Leo's story. John's chest tightened as he absorbed the boy's words, the full weight of his actions that day, hitting him in a way they hadn't before. It wasn't just an act of bravery. It had been a lifeline, one that had rippled out to change the course of 2 lives. For the first time, John truly understood the impact of what he had done. After the ceremony, Leo eagerly approached John, his eyes still glistening with excitement. Mr. Harper, he began almost shyly, would you like to come to my house? I'd really like you to meet my mom. His voice was filled with hope, and John, moved by the boy's sincerity, couldn't refuse. As they walked to Leo's home, John noticed how the streets of the village felt oddly familiar. The dusty paths, the rusting fences, and the simple homes reminded him of his own childhood neighborhood. When they arrived, Leo opened the creaky wooden gate to a small, weather-worn house. The walls were patched with mismatched materials, and the roof sagged slightly, a testament to years of wear and tear. Despite its humble appearance, the home radiated warmth and care, with flower pots arranged neatly along the steps. Inside, the living room was small but tidy. A faded sofa with patched cushions sat against one wall, and a tiny dining table stood in the corner. On the table were sewing materials, spools of thread, fabric scraps, and a half-finished dress. The smell of freshly cooked rice lingered in the air, mixed with the faint scent of detergent. As John's eyes scanned the room, something caught his attention. Hanging on the wall above the sofa was a framed photograph. He stepped closer, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the smiling face in the picture. It was his mother. The image was old and slightly yellowed, but it was unmistakable. She was standing with another woman, both of them dressed in simple clothing, arms around each other as if sharing a private joke. His breath caught as memories came rushing back. The woman beside his mother in the photograph was Leo's mom. John remembered her now, a kind, soft-spoken presence from his childhood, someone who had worked in their home when his mother was still alive. "Where did you get this picture?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Leo looked puzzled for a moment. "Oh, that's my mom and her best friend. She always talks about her," he said. "She said they worked together a long time ago." "That's your mom?" John nodded slowly, his mind reeling. The small house, the smell of fabric and detergent, the quiet resilience. It all reminded him so much of the home he'd once known. Standing there, it felt as though time had folded in on itself, bringing him back to a chapter of his life he thought he'd left behind. At that moment, a woman's voice called from another room. "Leo, who's here?" The door to the kitchen opened, and a woman stepped out, wiping her hands on an apron. She froze when her eyes met John's, her face a mix of shock and recognition. "John?" she whispered, her voice trembling. It was Leo's mother, and in that instant, the threads of their shared past became clear. John wasn't just meeting Leo and his mother, he was reconnecting with a piece of his own story. Leo's mother, Maria, stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes fixed on John. "It really is you," she murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief. Slowly, she stepped closer, her hands trembling as she removed her apron. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." John's mind raced, trying to place her. Memories of his childhood home surfaced, the smell of fresh laundry, the gentle humming of a lullaby from the kitchen. "Maria," he said softly, the name finally coming to him. "You worked in our house. You were my mother's friend." Maria nodded, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "I was more than her friend, John. She was like a sister to me. When your father left, I stayed as long as I could to help her. But," her voice trailed off, and she looked at Leo. "I had my own child to care for. I had to leave." John's brow furrowed as he pieced together the fragments of their shared history. "I remember you leaving," he said. It felt like everything fell apart after that. Maria's expression grew heavier, and she gestured for John to sit. "There's something you don't know," she began, her voice wavering. "Your mother and I, we shared more than just friendship. We shared a bond deeper than most. Before she passed, she told me something that I've carried with me ever since." John leaned forward, his heart pounding. "What is it?" Maria hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Leo is your brother, John, your father and I. It happened after your mother and he separated. I didn't mean for it to happen, but when your mother found out, she forgave me. She even encouraged me to keep the child, to raise him with love." The room fell silent. John stared at Maria, the weight of her words sinking in. His eyes flicked to Leo, who stood at his mother's side, wide-eyed and confused. "Mother?" John whispered, his voice barely audible. Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Your mother made me promise never to tell you, to protect you from more pain. But I think she'd want you to know now. I've raised Leo with everything I could, even when we had nothing. He's always reminded me of you, strong, determined, and kind." John felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. The boy who had looked up at him with such admiration and gratitude was more than just a stranger he had once saved. He was family. "Leo," John said, his voice trembling as he turned to the boy, "you're my brother." Leo's face lit up with a mix of shock and joy. "Really?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You're my brother?" John stood and pulled Leo into a tight embrace, his emotions spilling over. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "And I promise from this moment on, I'll always be here for you." Maria watched them with tears in her eyes, the years of silence and sacrifice finally giving way to a moment of connection. For the first time, John felt the emptiness in his heart begin to fill. He hadn't just rediscovered a piece of his past, he had found a future, one built on the bonds of family. The drive back from Leo's home was silent, but John's mind raced with a flood of emotions. As the car moved through the narrow village roads, he replayed the day's revelations in his head. The connection to Maria, the discovery of Leo as his brother, and the undeniable resilience they had shown in the face of hardship. He knew he couldn't simply walk away and return to his life as though nothing had changed. The next morning, John sat down with Maria and Leo in the principal's modest office at the school. The sunlight streamed through the dusty windows as John leaned forward, his expression firm yet warm. "Maria," he began, "you've done so much for Leo. You've sacrificed everything to give him a chance. It's my turn to help." Maria looked at him, her hands clasped tightly together. "John, you've already done enough by saving us that day. I could never ask for more." "You didn't ask," John said gently, "but I want to. I'm going to cover all of Leo's educational expenses, from now until he graduates college. He'll have every opportunity he needs to succeed." Leo's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in shock. "Really? College too?" he asked, his voice trembling with excitement and disbelief. John smiled and nodded. "Yes, college too. And Maria," he continued, turning to her, "I want to help you as well. You've worked so hard for so long. I'll make sure you have a stable job, one that pays you fairly and gives you the security you deserve." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she struggled to find the words. "I don't know how to thank you, John," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't have to," John replied, his tone sincere. "This is what family does for each other." For the first time in years, Maria and Leo felt the weight of their struggles begin to lift, and for John, the decision felt like the most meaningful one he had ever made. It wasn't just an act of charity. It was a way to rebuild the family he didn't know he had, and to honor the sacrifices of the mother who had taught him the value of kindness and resilience. John Harper knew that helping Leo and Maria was just the beginning. During his visit to the town, he had noticed the lack of resources available to children like Leo. Students with dreams, but without the tools or opportunities to pursue them. Inspired by the resilience and potential he saw in the community, John decided to take it a step further. He announced his plan to establish a learning center in the heart of the town. The Harper Learning Center, as it would be called, would provide access to books, computers, and after-school programs. It would also host workshops to teach practical skills like coding, language learning, and creative arts. The goal was not only to help students excel academically, but also to empower them to dream beyond their circumstances. When John shared his vision with the school and local leaders, the response was overwhelming. Teachers volunteered to help run the programs, parents offered to contribute their time and effort, and even local businesses pledged donations. "This center will be a lifeline for our children," the principal said with tears in her eyes. "It's exactly what we need." Construction began quickly, and John made regular visits to oversee the progress. He ensured the center was equipped with modern tools and a welcoming environment. Bright murals painted by local artists adorned the walls, featuring images of children reading, exploring, and imagining a brighter future. The community's involvement was the key to the project's success. Parents helped with landscaping, students pitched in to set up furniture, and local craftsmen lent their expertise to make the center both functional and beautiful. John made it clear that this was not just his gift to the town. It was a collaboration, a testament to what could be achieved when people work together. When the center finally opened, it was more than just a building. It was a symbol of hope and opportunity for every child in the community. For John, it was also a way to honor the struggles of his past, while giving others the chance to rewrite their own stories. On the day of the Learning Center's grand opening, John pulled Leo aside to a quiet corner, away from the buzz of excitement. Kneeling to meet Leo's gaze, John placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. "Leo," he began, his voice steady and full of warmth, "you're not just my brother, you're my family, and family sticks together." Leo's eyes widened, a mix of admiration and emotion crossing his face. John continued, I promise you, I'm going to be here for you. Not just today, not just while you're in school, but for the long run. Whatever you need to grow, to chase your dreams, I'll be there to help you. Leo nodded slowly, his expression shifting to one of determination. I won't let you down, Mr. Harper, he said, still shy about calling him brother. I'll work hard, I'll study harder than anyone. I'll make you and Mom proud. John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. I know you will, Leo. You already have. The two shared a hug, the bond between them deepening with unspoken understanding. For John, it was a moment of purpose. For Leo, it was a spark of hope. Together, they were ready to face the future, hand in hand. The day of the Harper Learning Center's grand opening dawned bright and clear, as if the sky itself was celebrating. Families from all over the town gathered at the entrance of the new center, their excitement buzzing in the air. Children clutched balloons, parents snapped photos, and teachers beamed with pride as they mingled in the crowd. The center stood as a beacon of hope, its colorful murals and modern design a stark contrast to the simplicity of the surrounding town. John Harper stood on the stage, his suit impeccable yet understated. He glanced at the audience, a sea of eager faces, including Leo's and Maria's, standing proudly in the front row. As the murmurs died down, John stepped to the microphone. Today isn't just about opening a building, John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. It's about opening doors. Doors to knowledge, to opportunity, and to a better future for every child here. The crowd erupted into applause, and John took a deep breath before continuing. Growing up, I didn't have much. I know what it feels like to struggle, to wonder if there's any way out. But I also know the power of someone believing in you, of being given a chance. That's what this center is for, to give every child here the tools they need to dream big and achieve those dreams. His voice softened as he added, but this isn't just my gift to you. It's a gift from all of us. The parents who helped build it, the teachers who will run it, the students who will bring it to life. This center belongs to you. The crowd cheered, many wiping away tears as John cut the ribbon, officially opening the center. It was a day of celebration, unity, and hope, a moment where the entire town felt the power of possibility. For John, it was a moment of profound fulfillment, a step toward healing his own heart by helping others find their way forward. As the ceremony came to an end, the crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind the warm buzz of shared joy and hope. John stood at the entrance of the Harper Learning Center, looking out at the town that had come together to celebrate. Beside him were Leo and Maria, their faces glowing with pride and gratitude. Maria reached out, gently touching John's arm. "Thank you, John," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not just for the center, but for everything. For giving Leo a chance, for helping us rebuild, and for finding your way back to us." John turned to her, his eyes soft but resolute. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "We're family, and family takes care of each other." Leo, standing between them, looked up at John. "Does this mean we're really like a team now? You, me, and Mom?" John smiled, crouching down to Leo's level. "Not just a team, Leo. We're a family, and families stick together no matter what." Leo grinned, his youthful enthusiasm infectious. "Then let's go inside," he said, pointing toward the center's open doors. "We've got a lot of dreams to start working on." With that, the three of them walked hand in hand into the new learning center. The building's bright colors and vibrant energy seemed to echo the promise of a fresh start, not just for Leo, but for all the children in the community. As they stepped inside, Maria looked at John, a sense of peace washing over her. She could see the boy she once knew in the man standing beside her, a man who had found his way back to the family he didn't know he had. Together, they walked forward, opening a new chapter filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. If this story touched your heart and you want more inspiring tales of hope, resilience, and the power of human connection, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that button and join us for more unforgettable journeys that will warm your soul and remind you of the beauty in life.